Welcome to the Routing for Success podcast, the show where we interview today's top logistics professionals, giving them a platform to share their stories and best practices. I'm your host, Jay
And
Kirsch.
I'm your host, Emily Blair. Today's guest is Steve Ramsthel. This is part 2. Skip back a week and catch the last episode if you missed it. In today's part 2, we jump in with Steve sharing his tips and tricks on using unique characteristics to maximize your next round of negotiations.
This episode is brought to you by AP Equipment Financing. AP Equipment Financing can bring you the best deals on step vans, panel vans, cutaways, and more, deliver them straight to your facility, and finance them with low monthly installment options. Click the link in the description to this episode or visit apfinancing.com.
What I see is that the terminal managers don't even understand unique characteristics, which is a tournament. And what I see a lot of contractors will say, well, the cost of business has gone up and I'm paying more for gas. And it's like, well, no shit. I mean, everybody's doing that. Right. But that's not unique. If they don't want to pay for that, well, then that's another issue. And I think that's why it's always good to go back and do a cost to operate. And if you're not running EBITDA's, what I always say, free cash flow of 15 to 18%, then we shouldn't be in this business because it's not about enough money left over to pay for the capital expenditures and your time and effort and risk. And that's a different story. So they may have a valuation of the business that may be way off. And that's not a unique characteristics conversation. That's more of a dispatch issue. And so what I always do is I ask for FedEx in writing to provide the total number of assumed dispatches. We want to make sure that's right. For the valuation of the CSA or the PCAT, and the total number of miles and miles per day per driver and stops per day per driver. Those 4 metrics will essentially drive 90% of your costs to operate, and everything else is going to be market driven. It'll be gas, be labor, and things of that nature. And there have been disparities between their number of assumed dispatches and what's actually real. And there's work to be done there. But, I would say back to unique characteristics, before you just fill out a sheet and spend a lot of time, money, and energy, the question that you have to ask yourself is that really unique? Right?
Yeah, Steve, I've never renegotiated a FedEx contract. But what I'm hearing, it sounds like if you go in with more operational costs and you have all the numbers laid out in front of you, you might be able to get more money in a certain bucket that then allows you to have a greater return on your business. Is there any world where actually optimizing your DRO, like you said before, and you found $180,000, when that's reflected on your P&L and you go to the negotiation table, is there any way that might hurt what you're actually receiving from FedEx because your business is so much more profitable now?
I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. First of all, before making those changes, I wasn't making any money. I was probably losing a little money.
Yeah.
So they actually plan for you to make money if you run your business the right way. Uh-huh. I wasn't actually making money in SDSA, and that was my bad because I wasn't into the details enough to provide I wasn't checking the checker. And frankly, I probably wasn't smart enough with my limited knowledge of DRO at that time to actually call BS on him, right? Kind of a deal. But now I know, and it's my money. So improving your profitability, they're not going to penalize you for, I don't believe. I've also noticed in the last 3-4 months that they're actually giving us more money. Not a lot. And I've been doing negotiations for about 6 years, but they held us flat from an ISP charges perspective. And basically their tagline was, we'll become more efficient. Well, that only plays out enough to where it's like, well, I became more efficient, but I can't eat all that inflation. So I think they're through that from what I can tell. And now I'm seeing 3 to 5% just on ISP charges once you normalize the PCAT data for the fuel and make that comparative analysis. Now, is that going to offset for inflation? The answer is no. So I think we can always use more. It's getting better. Is that going to make us sustainable over a 3 to 5 year period of time? I don't know. If they don't give us 3 to 5 or more going forward, I think we could be in trouble, but time will tell. I do, however, also see a lot of contractors that raise their hand now and say, hey, this ain't working, and I want to go through a renegotiation, and they are entertaining those. And in a lot of cases, they're coming up with some serious money. So there are good stories. I'm not saying they're all good. But everything has, their unique challenges, and not all the time a wonderful solution. And then some people, I'll just say some contractors, what I call legacy contractors, that don't understand a profit and loss statement, or don't want to mess around with DRO. If you don't want to do that or don't have the business acumen, FedEx is probably not a business model right now to be in, because it's really complicated. I mean, with all the safety compliance and freaking, Schedule L, and now they're badgering us with these QVIs and safety stuff, and they're doing their job. It's all coming down from Pittsburgh, and I get that, but it can be overwhelming to somebody that got into this business 25 years ago and has not embraced technology and running the business by the metrics and things of that nature. So it can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of turnover with those, what you call legacy contractors right now. The most turnover that I've ever seen in the FedEx space, and I've been calling FedEx contractors for the last 7 years. So my question when it comes to selling and valuing routes while selling, if the contractor puts in the initial work, gets a contract that's, I think you said 2 to 3%, at the most extreme case, 13.5% up, while simultaneously becoming as efficient as possible with the DRO, what can they do for their route valuation when they go to sell?
So in order to get a decent route so let me say today, FedEx routes are worth less today than they were 2 years ago for 2 reasons. One is the volume or the revenue is down, and 2, the margins are down. The margins are down because inflation has eaten away at our profitability. So I would say a couple of years ago, the free cash flow, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, or a normalized P&L, was probably in the low to mid 20s. That number now is around the 15, 16 range. So you take 10 points of profit out, and that is a lot of money. And just to make sure everybody understands is the EBITDA, the multiple of EBITDA in the FedEx space is about 3.25 to 3.5. If somebody's trying to sell it for more than that, that's smoke and mirrors. It's just, and frankly, if you're buying for something more than 3.5 times EBITDA, you're probably buying at a place where you're assuming a lot of risk, and there's going to be a lot of challenge to meet the cash flow model to pay the debt service and the CapEx and all of those things. So now there are instances where you're going to buy over 3.5 of EBITDA if the fleet is amazing. You got a new fleet, you're balanced, and you're buying a lot of fleet value versus just blue sky. So that's something you need to look at. But if you don't have a profitable business, you really don't have a sellable business. You've got trucks. And we've done a lot of transactions where people just said, I got my PPP loan, I got my ERTC credit, but I'm just kind of tired of the relationship with FedEx. I'm out. And I'm like, well, your P&L kind of sucks. And, and they don't really want to put in the time and effort to learn, how to optimize. And they're just like, literally, no pun intended, want to throw the keys, and just be done. And it's like, well, then your business is worth what I call bucks, trucks and a few bucks. And now somebody else is going to have to come along and optimize if they want to make a profit in this business. So I'd say if you're not profitable and you want to get the maximum valuation and you're willing to put in the sweat equity, the blood, the sweat and the tears to optimize and kind of reboot, then you're going to have to embrace things about getting better dispatch, probably buying newer trucks, because I'm going to tell you, used trucks in this environment you're going to get repairs and I would say parts and labor are going to kill you. Now, the only exception to that would be is there are contractors out there that I know of. Steve Reebok was one of my friends, and all he does is he does rural routes, and he's got that one down. He makes a lot of money, but he has his own mechanics, and he's really good at that stuff. But I don't have my own mechanic because I'm too small to have that, and I'm not good at that kind of stuff. So if I'm going to depend on a service provider that is going to be pay as you go, or I'm just paying the labor rate, from a mechanic, but I have to be very thoughtful about my repairs and my maintenance. So it's not a one size fits all kind of strategy around trucks. You have to look at, am I doing rural? Am I doing, do I urban? I always put low, medium, and high mileage. So anything under 75 miles a day is what I call urban and, pretty tight. And there's 75 to 150, and that's like kind of a hybrid. And then anything over 150 is rural. And there's truck strategies for each one of those segments, depending on cost to operate and wear and tear and things of that nature. But it kind of back to the valuation is when you look at, and everybody should have an exit strategy. You have to manage the relationship with FedEx, make sure you don't get a bunch of OTCs. You want to stay on the bronze categories, you want to be silver or better. Well, how do you do that? Well, you got to be able to make enough money to pay your bills, which is be efficient. You got to make sure that you hire the right people and retain the right people, because the undesirables, or as Hillary would say, the deplorables, I think that would, those people will drive they're horrible on your P&L, and your service, and they're going to get you in a lot of trouble. So that you got to get rid of those people, but you really have got to be profitable with a decent relationship with FedEx if you want to sell your business. So the expectation would be you're probably going to get 3.25 to 3.5 times your free cash flow. Okay. Well, what does that mean, free cash flow? It's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So what does that mean? That is revenue minus all of your operational expense. If you add back your truck payments, if you will, and any debt service that you have, in an officer's salary where the officer is actually not involved in the day-to-day business, that would be a normalized profit and loss statement. And that would be your EBITDA. You multiply by 3.25, 3.5. You might be able to get a little bit more than that if you happen to be in a growth state, which is where people are moving, like in Texas and then the Arizonas and the Floridas, and that we'll call the Sun Belt, or low taxes, and where there's sunshine, or generally have a higher demand. Utah is a really high demand. Colorado, for whatever reason, California still is. But there are certain states that will drive a little bit higher of a multiple than that. But that's kind of the formula in route valuation. But at the end of the day, you got to be profitable if you want to get something for your business.
Steve, have you found that it's been more challenging recently to get buyers SBA loans to purchase businesses, or has that stayed pretty steady?
It is more difficult, and I'll tell you why. Is because the cost of money in the last 2 years from an SBA perspective have gone from 6% to 11 to 11.5%. So if you think about this, there's two things happening. If you're less profitable because you've had to eat a bunch of inflation, so if your EBITDAs have gone from 22 or 24% down to the 15, 16, and that's pretty well run CSA at 15, 16. And then you now have to service debt that's costing you 11.5 points on the dollar. There's really not much left. So I've just found that we're in a squeeze situation where new buyers are not able to cash flow very effectively with an SBA loan. On the other hand, if somebody is walking away from a business and they're selling it bucks and a few trucks, right? Then that's a different situation. So in our business, we've seen less SBA funding, although we've done help with a fair amount of that, to more equipment financing plus cash to get the deal done. And not a lot of conventional out there. There's not a lot of banks that are comfortable with the FedEx relationship right now, but we've seen a lot of cash. And then we've done ROBS, which is a retirement tax qualified money coming out of IRAs to do transactions where they're funding the transaction with a ROB plus an equipment financing. And then what they're doing is they're getting in and they're turning things around from a profitability perspective. And I think the long play is, I think people that are getting in the business now are saying, okay, this is last mile delivery. It's not going to go anywhere. You're kind of buying stock at a 52-week low, if you will. And you're buying in kind of cheap. And then you're hoping that over the next 3 to 5 years, your revenues are going to go up, your profitability is going to go up. And I think that's where I wrap my mind around. It's like, I'm good with that. And then I think some of the new buyers today are not necessarily trying to make a living at it, but they're trying to build a business with the cash flow of the business and also leverage depreciation, in some cases accelerated depreciation, which comes through truck financing and things of that nature. So we have a lot of buyers now that might have a full-time job. Actually, I had a full-time job when I first got into FedEx. I was working for Salesforce.com, and I was doing their global go-to-market strategy in Europe and North America and South America. So I was gone a lot. And I was able to get my taxes on that income way down from owning my CSA, buying trucks, doing some accelerated depreciation. And I got my federal taxes down a lot. Not, I would say zero, but a lot. And now the only bad thing is when you're effectively with depreciation, you're kicking the can down the road and you're going to pay it at some other point in time, but you're generally going to pay it at a lower tax rate. So that it works. It works well. So that's kind of the theme in terms of the market. We're not seeing as much SBA. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just that because the cost of money is so high and the margins are down, transactions are still happening, but they're different types of transactions.
Steve, if there's a contractor that right now is classified in the trucks plus a couple bucks category, and they want to make more money on the sale of their routes, but they're like, dude, I don't even know how to spell EBITDA. What is that? Is that something that you help with your consulting business, or do you have any resources for them to go to get into the category where they're going to make more money on the sale of their business?
So we do help with that if that's what somebody wants, that help. And I like to teach people how to fish. And I don't run a consulting practice where I'm going to sell something for $8,000 and you're to call me if I'm busy or if I'm available. Here's my time. I would say what I like to do is say, I can spend an hour with somebody and, get them through a profit and loss statement. I have tools that I go to make sense, hopefully make sense for them and understand the levers to pull or to move things in the right direction. The question becomes, for that contractor, do they have the want and desire to make those things happen? Because they just don't happen automatically. Might not only understand what levers to pull, but are you willing to make those changes in your organization? And if they're resistant to change management and their staff is, I would say that that's maybe a very difficult thing to do. But the short answer is yes, we can help with that. And it's going to be more of I'm going to show you what the levers are and how to effectively manage your P&L. And I would say the number one thing that's going to drive the positive or movement in your P&L is going to be dispatch, because dispatch involves labor, the taxes go with that, the fuel that goes with that, repairs and maintenance, and really exposure to accidents. So we are in a business that's, I would say it doesn't have a complete value chain like other businesses. And when I say that, I mean, you don't have marketing, you don't have sales, and you don't have accounts receivable. Right? When you look at the different components of the business, that's the wonder about the FedEx model. The bad thing is we only have one really lever to pull. It's called operational efficiency. So if you're not good at operational efficiency, and operational efficiency involves trucks, and it involves people, and obviously the methodology and how to dispatch, which we've talked about. But you got to be really good at hiring. And I think everybody said this on it. If you don't like people, and you don't pick the right people, and have the right culture within your company, you don't care about people, and they don't like your respect. If you're aloof and disconnected in your management from the organization, you're probably not going to have really good results around employee retention. If you don't have good results around employee retention, the whole model kind of crumbles. So you look at we're really in the HR business, and we can teach people how to deliver packages. That's not very difficult. But if you don't pick the right human resource, if you will, and retain them, then nothing really works in this business.
Steve, how do you pay your drivers? Do you choose to pay hourly? Do you pay by stop? Do you do a mix? Do you do bonuses? How do you keep that, incentivize them, but keep it under control?
Yeah. So I pay them at or above market. But what does that actually mean? So they have a compensation plan that aligns with my business objectives. And what I do is I pay them X dollars per day. I can do this down in California, and there is all my vehicles are over 10,000 pounds. So I'm not going to have an issue with the hourly rate. So I pay them X dollars per day plus Y dollars for over 100 stops per day. And every route has a different threshold. So I take that back. A few routes have different thresholds. So most of my hybrid e-commerce routes are going to be at 100 as a threshold. And somebody that might be more business heavy is going to be around 80 or 90. So they get into the money for that. Then this is what I do that I don't know anybody else that does it, but I pay them $10 a day for perfect service. So if their inbound service is 100%, then I pay them $10 a day. That's not a lot of money, but they might at the end of the week say, I got 5 days perfect service. Well, why is that good for me? Because that's one of the metrics, a big metric, where at the end of the month, FedEx is going to say, hey, you were a 99.5 or better. So those three things is how I pay them. It works really well. Well, how do I get their pay to where they need to be? Well, I need to give them 130 stops a day. Well, how do I get them 130 stops a day? Well, and do it within under 8 hours. Well, that's the dynamic routing we talked about. So that helps me get them there. So I have less employees making more money that are happier and getting me better service. Now, the key to making all of that happen is having a BC compensation. So my BC, what I do is I pay him X dollars per day. And in order for him to be in the game and for him to be contributing to my revenue, I don't want him to run a work area every day to help out. And I'll tell you how I do that. But I pay him 75, in my case, 75 cents a stop from stop one. So he's going to be in the game, right? And he's going to help me. And then I'm also going to pay him $300 a week in my case, if my payroll is at or below 50% every week. So I have a shared Dropbox. I have an admin down here in Phoenix, and we figure out what the gross pay is for everybody against the settlement statement. And I'll tell you that after I made the change in DRO, every single week, except for 1 week, I think, we were below 50%. Before, I was like 65, 66, 67% of payroll to my revenue, which is horrible. So you think about this, I took 15% of my revenue, I'm not putting it in my pocket. Where I'm putting it is actually in various things, but part of that eventually is going to go in my pocket. if that makes sense. So that helped out a lot. At the end of the month, I have a monthly bonus for him. So if you look into the CSP performance indicator scorecard, that scorecard is the genesis or the foundation for medals. And what I learned through this whole medals program is if you miss a pickup or a missed pickup window, it's worse than sitting around all day.
Wow.
Not that that's a good thing, right? I was like, whoa, that's a wake up call. So what I have for my BC is I pay him, I won't say the number, but it's a very good number, X number of dollars at the end of the month for 0 missed pickups and 0 missed pickup windows. And if my ILS, inbound service level, is 99.5 or higher, I'm paying him, boom. So I've got his undivided attention in every day looking at service and missed pickups. I mean, I put that in 3 months ago. 3 months in a row. I've never had this as a contractor in the 9 years. I had no missed pickups every single month for the last 3 months. And my inbound service has been at 99.6, 99.7. So needless to say, I'm gold or silver training gold. I mean, we're going to ink that this next month in our BRL. But I could never get there before. Now, part of that was, lack of efficiency. Part of it was, management oversight, which I failed to do my job there. And I know better now. And then also making sure that I align compensation at the driver level and at the BC level to my business objectives, if that makes sense. So a lot of these principles I learned in my corporate experience. I think what happened, here is that small business, I got a little sloppy, I can do that kind of stuff because I didn't have to report into somebody else, the HR, and they were to deem me on something. So I would say, if you own your own business and you don't have a rigorous way in which you're managing by the metrics, it's going to cost you some money.
That's really a neat way of paying your BC. It almost seems like profit sharing with your BC. So going from the BC that you ended up splitting ways with in the beginning of this show that you shared the story with to this BC now, is it purely financial motivation that's allowing him to thrive like he is, or was it selection by you on the HR side, or is it some sort of training or something else that's making this difference?
I think so. First of all, young guy, and he lived right close to the terminal. So proximity wise, he was right there. He wanted to learn more. I decided to kind of take him under my wing. We kind of together learned DRO, and then I'm pushing him and he's pushing me. I'm pushing him more probably on the continuous improvement piece of it. So that's work. And then when I layered in the incentive compensation, that got his attention. And he's making more money now than he's ever made before. And I'm making more money than I have. I think, in the BC that I did have, I tried to bring him up from geographically from another area. And he lived like 50 miles away. And it was like with the traffic and everything, it could be up to an hour and a half commute. So what I found is the proximity of drivers and BCs relative to your operation, because this is not a job where operationally you go work from home. Doesn't work in logistics. You got to show up at a station. You got to show up and see the people. You got to work with this terminal management. You got to move packages around a lot. And so I think my other BC was not in a position to be there every day on time and in the game. And it was too much to ask to him. And I think I knew that going into it. But, oh well, right? So I'm in a better place. He's probably in a better place. And I think everybody won out of that one.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered a ton of awesome information. I think we kind of hit the bullet points that we wanted to. Steve, did you have anything that we missed that you wanted to bring up?
The only thing I would say I would encourage people is, I initially didn't get my hands dirty around DRO because I'd heard all of this negativity around it. Like, oh, it's a piece of crap and blah, 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 I'm like, so I kicked the can down the road and like, I'll just let my BC handle that. And so I never embraced it. I just kind of delegated it. That was a big mistake. And what I'll tell you is that it's actually not that hard. Once you kind of get in there, get your hands dirty, understand the nuances of the tool, it works really good. Now, the tool's fantastic. Again, I'll say that the data and how FedEx puts it in there that's another conversation. I'm not going to use bad words here. So that's a challenge that I'm never going. It's like saying loaders, right? I want people to load my truck. And then it's like, oh my gosh, the quality of that person. I know why the station doesn't do drug tests, because if they did a drug test, I would not have any loaders, especially, so, but that's a true statement. Now, the point being is it kind of goes, it's like data. It's like your data really sucks and it comes in too late, and you should find a better way to get the data in the tool because the tool's pretty good. But that's just, I wish FedEx was a better partner. Actually, I don't know if we're actually a partner with them. I think we're just a vendor for them. So they remind me of that every once in a while. And it is what it is. I'm just going to work with what I've got as best I possibly can. Obviously, the tool works great, but I would say don't be scared of the tool. I would say that you probably don't even need to hire a consultant if you're halfway bright. You've got IQ of at least 100, and you can get in there and run some test plans. I would go encourage you to probably look at some videos. It's not that difficult, and I think if you can get in there and run a 2 or 3 plans, you're not doing it as an AO, and make sure that you're no worse off in dispatch than informed optimal +1. And if you do that, and that may facilitate some kind of change management in the organization, I think your economics are going to be much better. And I think you'll be more encouraged about your business. That's my kind of final words, if you will. Anyway, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense. And before you go, we do have 3 questions that we've been asking each guest that we've had on. But before we go into that, if somebody wants to reach out to you for one of your other businesses, the consulting business or the route brokering business, how do they get a hold of you?
So I say go to our website, www.smrcapital.com, or my phone number, which would be 480-772-1814. I think the best possible way is go to the website, and there you can do a contact me. The reason why I like doing that is that I can log you into my system. I use Salesforce, and we can put you in there. You guys probably do that too. And I can your record. I got activity history. It's well, and then people on team can work with you too. So I'd say that's probably the best place to go, just from a workflow and a data perspective. And that way we can get back with you and schedule a time. If you want to schedule a time for like a consulting session, I have a little link that I send you. You look at my calendar and you can schedule a time, because time zones may be different.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Now it's time for our world famous 3 to thrive in FedEx. All right. Question number 1. What was one of the most worthwhile investments that you have made into your FedEx business?
Okay. So this may be a commercial for you guys, but it was new trucks. I've learned that lesson twice. I think what I've learned is if you have really portable trucks, especially like old diesel trucks, with all of that, I don't know, pollution stuff they have on the back, or when that stuff breaks, it's horrible. So I was very resistant to change because I thought, I don't want to have any payments or anything. But what I learned was, by buying new trucks, I did 2 things. One, I reduced my repairs and maintenance by a big number. And 2 is I became more reliable to my team, and I wasn't in a chaotic situation all the time. I just hate that when you're broke down somewhere. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? And then somebody's going to get you for a $500 tow truck or whatever. They got you, and then you got to chase it all the time. So I think that was the big thing. And when I bought my second CSA, I was like, I'm not going to do that again. And well, 6 months into it, is like, this is not good. And I went right back to buying some new trucks, and it helped dramatically. So I think buying new trucks in my particular situation dramatically changed my economics and dramatically changed the reliability. And probably, I think, also helped my employee retention, because people like to be in new stuff and not crappy old stuff.
That's awesome. Our second question, we've kind of covered a little bit in this episode already, but oftentimes failure in business is our best teacher. What has been your favorite failure and why?
I would say my favorite failure was, and I knew better, was not inspecting the results at a level that where I held my immediate management accountable for their work product. And I know better because I spent 28 years in corporate, and that was part of the corporate rigorous, way to go, and how you bring people in and exit people out of the organization. And I think as a small business person, now that I'm self-employed and kind of semi-retired, if you will, I got really sloppy around that. And I learned the hard way, because what happens there is I'm not doing my manager any favors at all when you just let them kind of run. Didn't provide the right direction, probably not the right education. And certainly I lost probably hundreds of thousands of dollars over several years in what I would call inefficiencies or leakage, because of my oversight and failure into actually managing that resource. And not just that one resource, but I think when I went into COVID, I ended up hiring a couple managers. And then because when that volume came back and went down, I didn't actually let that person go or redirect his career into the driver position. And it just friggin' killed me, so from an economic perspective.
Thank you for that. Our final question: what is your favorite part of being a FedEx contractor?
I think the people. My wife and I said, it's like, why are you doing this? Well, it isn't because I love FedEx. I like the brand of FedEx. I think I understand brand value and all that. I think it's a trusted brand. It's a brand where you're going to have the work. You may not like the work at times, but the work's going to be there. But we created our own culture. My wife and I say, well, our FedEx business is our mission. And so I love my BC. I like all my people now. There are some people that no longer work there I didn't like very much, but that I have control of that. And it gives you a lot of freedom. So in my particular case, my business is out in the Pacific Northwest. I did that intentionally because I grew up there. I have an elderly father that lives up there. He's a retired physician. He's 90 years old. That allows me to go up there every other Tuesday morning, spend, 2 nights and 3 days with him, and maybe in the station 6 days a month. And I strategically plan that with the forums. So I'm there, I'm present, and I'm connected to that business. But it's the freedom and it's the people, I think, give me a lot of personal satisfaction.
That's amazing. Steve, you have been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with us. We really, really appreciate having you back.
You bet. Yeah, thank you.
Routing for Success is brought to you by AP Equipment Financing. In today's competitive market, it is essential to acquire the right trucks at a fair price and finance them in a way that makes sense for your business. Leveraging their extensive network of truck and van suppliers, the experts at AP Equipment Financing will help you locate the best deals on step vans, cutaways, panel vans, and more. Deliver them straight to your facility and finance them with low monthly installment options. Click the link in the description or visit apfinancing.com routingforsuccess.com for more information. Routing for Success is an independent production of AP Equipment Financing and is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by FedEx Corporation, FedEx Ground, Amazon, or any other logistics company discussed herein. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Routing for Success.